Hi, Dom.
Hi, Jenna.
Hi. Yeah, I think that people might notice that I sound just a little bit different. That's
Sound
because
fabulous. You
I
sound
know,
fabulous,
well,
by
it's
the way.
because after so much time and effort and more money that I care to acknowledge, I finally got my microphone situation sitched. So I think we can finally start the show properly now.
Let's do it.
Welcome to Laid Off and Looking. It's a podcast where friends and journalists, Jenna and Dom, we're looking to create a community for anyone who's been laid off, especially journalists, and also analyzing this wildly changing media landscape.
I love it.
Okay, we go to the
Okay.
intro. Okay, so here's what I do want to say in full. I'm not completely sitched with my microphone situation because I still have to get the boom to put the damn thing in, but I have a much better microphone as
You
opposed to
sound great.
before.
You
Yes,
sound
it
great.
sounds so much
I
different.
think yes, it does. It does. It's so much. It's a big deal. And
It's a
yes,
huge
it's a
deal.
it's a huge deal,
Oh
especially
my
people
God.
listening to us.
Yeah,
They're like,
exactly.
they're like, oh wow, you guys sound so much better now.
Oh, please.
Listen to
Even
this.
I would go back and listen to it and be like,
I
oh
know.
God.
I want to make sure people realize we have not lost it.
Ex- You
The
two
way we're
claim that you're
speaking, like,
professionals and yet
so
you sound terrible.
it's so ASMR-ish right now.
In fact, for a fundraiser, this podcast will be $1.99 for the first minute. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay, we'll get there.
All right.
Ah,
It's been another week. We are
episode
now at
4, right?
woohoo! 4 for 4. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, other than still unemployed, but I mean, still looking at unemployed, but it's been phenomenal. Like us doing the podcast this past week, which our listeners will notice that this is our first episode where we're having guests
I
on the
know.
show.
I feel so legitimate now,
It's like
which is sad that I didn't feel that when it was just us, because I mean, we were legitimate then, but
oh,
somehow
yes, but we're
getting
expanding our
buy-in
universe,
from out, yeah, so we're expanding our, oh, you're so good at the positive
enriching.
language. Enriching and expanding
I'm
the, no, you're so good at the positive language.
trying, but I
Which one
really
of us is
am.
Gen X again? Because I'm lost.
We're both, yeah. My friend who thinks I'm trying to co-opt the Gen Z, I'm like, believe you me, they're not going to have me, but I'd love to. I mean, they'll take one look at me like, no, but I adore them. But no, it's yeah, I mean, booking guests, and we have a guest book for next week, and we're looking forward. And I think we're just
We've
trying
got
to
leads.
we've got yes,
Somebody
and
sent us a lead. Like,
oh
what?
yes. So it's been, and also just like we had our, I mean, for again, for the listeners, like being fully transparent, we are now like we have meetings on almost a daily basis where we talk about future shows and looking how we're breaking things down. And of course, still trying to develop what we have right now in terms of just taking it a bit further, just like with your audio, it's like we're each and my boom mic and my lighting, and we're trying. I mean, I've got to I got to get to a place where I can look as good as you on your screen because I'm still trying to figure it out. Except my
You
background.
got to go to Sephora and just let yourself bug out.
Oh, it's not even the makeup, it's the lighting and everything. You actually told me to stop using my blur. I was using the blurry background, and you told me you saw my background without it, and you were
Hmm.
just like, Dom, just like drop that. I love how it looks just right there. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I got my
Yeah.
Legos and my Star Wars memorabilia. Everything's up there. So thank you, Jenna, for again pushing me out of my comfort zone and making me.
Oh.
How was your week?
My
How are you
week was
doing?
it was good. So, there's been enrichment.
Mm.
First of all, the whole microphone journey. Um, we have not reached final destination, but we are so much closer than we were before. So that was actually huge because that was
Can
a
you share?
journey.
Can you
Yeah.
share when we connected today? We got online a little bit earlier for our guest, and I think I saw you having a situation with your um mic stand.
Oh, with my mics. Okay, so right now my mic is on a stationary stand, so I have to pick it up
Right.
and bring it closer to my mouth if I want to
Yeah.
sound all luscious and podcasty. But it's right now it's sitting next to put it back down. It's sitting next to my computer. Now what I should have is a boom mic like you do. That
Right.
like for people who don't know what a boom mic is, um I don't know. It's like a
It's like an
robot
arm.
arm or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
and it like sticks the mic right in front of your face and it leaves your hands free, and that's what we were going for. I bought one. Not going to get into the price tag because I can still return it. But the point is that the spring situation was too tight, and the thing kept, um, oh whatever, it kept standing erect,
Yeah,
which ironically I did not want it to do that. So like, I was
Jenna, I
wrestling
just saw
with.
you wrestling. I saw you. I only saw was in. I saw the arm, and I saw you, and I was like, "What is going on?" And you're just like, "This damn thing doesn't work." Oh,
But again, it is nothing that can't be resolved. It was
yes.
just super
Oh,
frustrating for a couple of
yes.
hours this morning.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, so there was that. I did some, I don't know, I did some more social media engagement, which I had made a commitment regardless of, what had happened. Not regardless, I don't want to say, but I had made a commitment like back in October when we were still working, is my point, that I was going to be more active and engaged on social media because I have a tendency to, just dip out and whatever. But so I did some of that. I had been holding on to a letter from Zora Neale Hurston that is just absolutely awesome. She scorches her ex-husband in this letter, and so I dressed up. I put on, a nice little 40s style hat, kind of gave it a little bit of a turn to it, and read her article and posted that in black and white because of course this took place in
Love it.
1942.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. I was really proud of myself for doing that. And yeah, then in engaging with social media, okay, I am very much a Gen X Muppet kid. I loved the Muppets, the Muppet Show, Sesame Street, all of that. I ate it up. In fact, watching Kermit the Frog on the Muppet News Flash, that was
I
the
love it.
beginning of my journalism journey.
Mm-hmm.
Loved it. So I follow Muppets and Sesame Street. Here's the thing. It was one thing when Elmo came on, it was just like, hey, everybody, how are you doing? And then, of course, people let it rip. But then Grover, which is the worst because Grover was my favorite, shows up on Twitter and says, as a news reporter, I always do my research before I break a story. I am confident to report that you are so special and amazing. Now, first of all, Grover, thank you so much. Love the affirmation, but maybe journalism, not really the place you want to step in
Read
right
the room, Grover.
exactly.
You
So,
do
of
not
course,
want this.
again, the internet is just like, hello, Muppets at Sesame Street. And so, of all of the responses, and this wasn't a response, it was a quote tweet, but the Twitter account Stuff Journalists were like posted an update to Grover's post. Update. Unfortunately, Grover was part of the latest round of newsroom cuts.
Could have told you,
I
Grover.
felt so like
He
Grover, this
tried.
is
They tried. Grover tried.
you had a
Uh,
job, you lost a job. Welcome to journalism.
Welcome to journalism, Grover.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, speaking of welcome to journalism, I understand you have some headlines.
yes. Actually, let's start off with I guess as of this week on Tuesday, February 13th. So now this has been we had heard about this maybe a few weeks ago, but Paramount Global officially announced layoffs beginning. And basically, what they're doing is they're laying off 3% of their global workforce, which amounted, I guess, about 800 employees in the US. Now, there were some, according to Deadline, there were, I'm reading over here, the company wide layoffs at Paramount Global on Tuesday impacted about 20 employees at CBS News. They mentioned a couple of possible correspondents who were laid off. I haven't seen anything official, so I'm not going to mention the names, but still lots of it just goes to show us how this just continues and no end in sight in terms of what's happening with the field of news and media, even about these layoffs. So, one thing that I thought was interesting was the Paramount CEO, uh, Bob Bakish, who yesterday in a company memo um, wrote, to those whom we are parting ways, we are incredibly grateful for your hard work and dedication. Your talents have helped us advance our mission of unleashing the power of content around the world. And mind you, this is just 2 days after Paramount CBS Sports recorded the most watched telecast of all time with the Super
Super
Bowl.
Bowl.
So, yeah,
Thanks for
timing
all your
wise, yeah,
talent and your efforts.
just saying.
Bye bye.
That was the timing of that just could have. I mean, there's no way now letting people know they're being laid off. There was always a bad time, of course, but just optic wise, how that looks after just 2 days after seeing that, that's just kind of
Yeah.
interesting. And now the second headline here. Now this is actually more actually Kara Swisher has a new book coming out
Oh.
February 27th. Yes. It's called Burn Book, a tech love story. Now, for those who are not aware, I'm assuming most people on here probably are, but just in case those aren't, she's an award-winning journalist. She has a number of podcasts, including Pivot.
Sorry, I thought you were going to explain the reference of Burn Book.
Oh no. Oh, if I have to start doing
Everybody should know.
that,
Everybody should know that. We're
if I
just going
have
to
to
skip
start
over
doing
that.
that, yes, I am. I can't help you with that one. If you have to ask me that, basically, there was an article in New York Magazine where they did they adapted part of her book, and it was an interesting couple of paragraphs that the whole article was interesting, but it really was looking at the start of her career and basically how in 1995 she was working for the Washington Post doing their tech news, if I'm correct. And she mentioned how she saw um, a quirky, and I'm quoting here from the article. In 1995, a quirky programmer in San Francisco named Craig Newmark started emailing friends a list of local events, job opportunities, and things for sale. The next year, he turned Craigslist into a web-based service and eventually started expanding it all over the country and the world. So Kara continues to, write about how basically to her, this was really, it was kind of clear that this was going to be a giant killer. Like this was going to be a big deal in terms of the news media. She said she told everyone who would listen to her at the Post that we needed to put all the money, all the people, and all the incentives into digital. I insisted that the bosses had to make readers feel like digital was the most important thing. But the bosses never did because the business they knew was the physical paper.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm curious what your kind of take is on that. I mean, are you surprised by that, Jenna?
Well, no. I I think the digital revolution, while for digital natives, perhaps, which I don't know if we quite count because both of us grew up without digital the digital world, and yet we're young adults when it came into existence, so I feel comfortable with it. But for the digital natives like the millennials and definitely Gen Z, um that's just how people function now. But for people who made their bones and grew their career in, I don't know, the before times, what do we call it, before digital, um I think it was misunderstood as perhaps a passing fad. Like the best way I can compare it to is I remember, at least I'm pretty sure, in like a Rolling Stone article back in the 90s or something, Keith Richards once referred to rap music as a fad. No, dude, it's
Right.
not a fad. and it has become the dominant music force.
Mhm.
When he said that, of course, it
Mhm.
was still rock and roll was
Mhm.
king. And I think it's kind of a similar thing where it's just like, no, what I do is no, this new thing, it's just a fad. It'll pass by. It's just a fad. It's never going to take over and change the world or the business model that I've come to know. And I think unfortunately too many people in leadership took that position and that point of view, and it is left, especially journalism, but in a lot of ways all forms of media, in this current just quagmire.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting just to see where, and that's why I think a lot of people are at this point, when you start to scramble to fix things, it doesn't always land. And people also can see when you seem desperate and when things feel like they're not, and here's the thing, there's been plenty of opportunities for people to be on, you know, the, I guess basically just like on the end of being proactive. And it feels like,
There's a lot of
it just might,
reactive happening.
there is,
There's a
yes.
lot of reactive happening. And that also, I'm not sure. Again, if you're not a digital native, especially if you're not regularly engaging with the platforms, you might not fully understand that no, reactive reads as fake and phony, and audiences don't engage with that.
You're gonna take the next headline, Jenna?
I sure am. And speaking of, I guess, building off of Kara Swisher's book, which I can't wait to
Hmm.
read when it comes out. Um, The Neiman Lab, which I also follow, they released an article. News organizations are leaving Twitter. What about you? Question mark. Even with Twitter losing credibility, leaving the platform requires a significant shift in how journalists track developing stories. That's easier said than done. So, with that, I want to welcome our very first guests on our fourth episode, Xana O'Neill and Jared Wiener, who are co founders of Forth. So, Forth on Forth, welcome, Xana and Jared.
Thank
Thank you
you. Well,
so
thank you.
much.
Great to be here. We're fourth without the U, I should point out.
Well, actually, yes. And there's so many questions that I had going into this. And one of
Yeah.
them was, why Forth without the U?
Well, we really wanted to we
Mm.
wanted to look toward the future of journalism, and so we really thought about. Of course, journalism is the fourth estate, and so we were playing around with that idea. But we liked the idea of fourth because it signaled that it was looking ahead. We always say, go forth or let's go forth, and so we felt like it was a positive and kind of a futuristic perspective on journalism.
And we want to be forthcoming. And ultimately, we're rebuilding the fourth estate, and we can't do it without you.
Okay, that's a wonderful play on words. All right, so but for anyone who might be like, wait, what, Forth? What is it?
So, fourth is, to put it simply, a news feed for news. We are, as you were talking about, there's been some shifts in the social media landscape that make it maybe not necessarily the best place to be getting your news anymore. But we realized that it really has been pretty good despite everything that we might say about social media. The vast majority of Americans still say self-report getting at least some of their news from social. It's of course higher amongst younger demographics. But of course, and I am sure I'm not saying anything that people here are shocked to hear about, a lot of social media platforms have been plagued by problems like misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, conspiracy theories, just general internet stuff that we've all kind of taken for granted recently. And we decided, Zana and I were former journalists ourselves, and we really felt that news deserved a better home on the internet. And so what we tried to do was take the good from social media, the ability to self-curate, the brevity, the diversity of sources, types of media, types of news, local, national verticals, and recreate that same news feed. So you can still doom scroll, you can still get a basic idea of what's happening around you, but walk away from that feeling like what you read actually can be trusted.
Okay, Zana, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say, only vetted journalists can post on Forth. So that's kind of the chief differentiator is that, we really consider ourselves a journalist-driven social news feed. So everyone who is posting has been vetted using very transparent criteria. And essentially, if you have a proven track record of objective and credible reporting, that's kind of how we measure who is able to join Forth and publish on the platform. But nobody else can publish.
Okay, because it sounds like you're poking holes into the troll business model. And well, no, because I mean, that's what we've seen on so many of the other platforms is that people will take the notion of news and then try to bend it and shift it into something that fits their agenda. So I understand that you also have an editorial process. Can either one of you feel comfortable taking us roughly through so we understand when you say a vetted journalist, what does that mean?
Absolutely. Jared and I joke that it is probably the least controversial editorial policy that you'll encounter because it's pretty standard for anyone who is practiced as a journalist in the US. So anybody who joins Forth or applies to join Forth has to agree to follow our editorial policy, which essentially just says that you are in pursuit of facts, that you are not going to publish misinformation, knowingly publish incorrect information, that when you make mistakes, that you swiftly and accurately correct these things. Obviously, journalists are not infallible, but we're not trying to get to perfection. We just want to have a place where credible news and information is kind of table stakes. So we ask that everybody who applies kind of agrees to that policy. And as we're looking at, whether a journalist is qualified, so to speak, or not, we're really looking just to make sure that they have a history of objective reporting. We're not looking for opinion. Reported analysis is okay, but we're really not looking for, here's my perspective on what the news event of the day is. We really want to see that somebody can have a fact-based approach to what they're reporting.
Oh man, I feel like we could do an entire episode breaking down the difference between facts, analysis, and opinion because I'm not sure everyone. No, seriously,
It's true.
studies have shown that most Americans aren't really clear on those differences as well. Dom, are there any questions that you have?
Yeah, actually, so on your platform, we also noticed that you don't have a comment section, and we wonder if
Mm.
that's deliberate right now. Is that something that is part of is that part of the program, or is it something that will be changing moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of probably the most talked about and wrestled with subject on our roadmap right now, because we do want to invite the interactivity and bi-directional communication process that the internet is so good for. The problem, of course, that we've really tried to wrestle with is how do we do this in a way that doesn't undercut our original mission. As Xana just walked through, we have a lot of safeguards in place to make sure that what you're reading is pretty much just the news. We don't want conspiracy theories or just wild out of the blue accusations or really just made up stories. We don't want harassment. We don't want hate speech. And we're trying to figure out a way of, once we open up the floodgates, how do we maintain that environment? We're working on a lot of different ways. We're trying to figure out, I think, the best way that we can do this and still keep our journalists safe and our audience safe, and still keep it to be a pleasant destination on the internet that people want to visit. Despite, I guess, the content of the news, but otherwise, something that they still want to look at throughout the day, when still allowing that level of interactivity into it. And not to mention, we've heard from a lot of journalists too who have said that some of the best parts about social media has been meeting sources and finding out about stories that they didn't know about. It's not a one-way street. And so it is an important thing that we are trying to work on to try and figure out how we can fully expand into that full picture.
Cool. I am also wondering though, I mean, there's been as different social media platforms, I'm not going to lay it all on one platform's feet, but there have been numerous times where I've seen journalists say, okay, that's it. I'm leaving this platform. Come follow me on Mastodon. Or another time there was something called Post.News. And now some people are just like, I don't know, maybe Threads. So as people hop around from platform to platform trying to find, I guess, a safe home, um, is that, I guess, how do you take that into consideration when there's like, it seems like we're in a space right now, especially when it comes to news, because I believe Meta recently said that they were going to suppress political content, whatever that is. Um, that people are looking still, they're still looking for that space. But it seems like right now there's just, I don't want to call it the Wild West, but I could be wrong. Maybe it is.
Yeah, we
And
want
I
to
think
be
that's,
that space. Oh, sorry,
yeah.
Jared. Yeah, we
No,
talk
please,
about this
please.
all the
Yeah.
time. So I think we're both like, yes, we
Yeah.
oh, we're so enthusiastic about this question because we want to be that home, that safe space for journalists, that go-to place. Because we both, we've been on both sides, both in newsrooms, at platforms, and we've seen, the upsides and the downsides to that kind of relationship. And primarily it's a downside. It's a very parasitic relationship. And we do not want to replicate that. We want to be the place where journalists go, where they know that they're putting their work on a platform that respects them and their editorial process. And also that they're not going to be adjacent to some crazy piece of content that they would be embarrassed to be associated with. And so we see ourselves, all of those platforms you mentioned are interesting, but they're also not built by journalists. And Jared, just to toot his horn for a moment, is a very rare breed of somebody who, is able to code and is an amazing developer, but also a journalist. So everything within Forth is kind of fundamentally built around ethical frameworks. That's something that's very important to us. But sorry, Jared, I cut you off. So go ahead.
I was going to say almost the same thing without the self-promotion. It really is, it's an opportunity for us. We think that, I visit, I probably am, very online capitalized, one of those people, and I go to a lot of different places. And I know that there are some platforms right now where I don't even necessarily look at the byline. I just kind of think, or username, however you want to distinguish the person who wrote something. But I often will just immediately open up another tab and go, that doesn't seem right, and check it and see. And so the thought was that takes just a lot of mental overhead, especially when you just want to know what's happening and you just want to be able to look at your phone in between meetings or commuting or whatever it is, however the point is in your day in which you get your news. We wanted to be able to kind of just take a lot of that off of our users' plates. And I know this also, of course, leads to the following question of, well, then, isn't this what newspapers have always done? Isn't this, what radio and television and all these other media have done? And the answer is, of course, it is. But what we've come to realize is that there's been user demand being created for a new form of packaging, a new form of consumption. And that's really what we're trying to do, is take those old school ideas of, just writing things that we believe to be true, which shouldn't be a radical concept, and moving that to where the technology and user behavior are today.
All right. I'm the queen of tangents, and I just want to say, on a tangent, from one journalist to another, the not wanting to toot your own horn thing seems like such a very journalistic thing. No, seriously, because the way a lot of us have been trained, the work is supposed to be the star, not us. And yet in this, it's a very unusual, I guess, space to sort of be like, but now I have to promote myself as. So anyway, that's something I struggle with, and I don't know, I guess, Jared, I feel you. Because that doesn't come natural.
I mean, I'll say former TV news producer here, and I feel like the only one of the few qualities that I can say every single TV news producer has is a completely deep-seated fear of ending up in the shot. And we just never want to be on camera. We never want, just keep us away, no spotlight. The
Right,
Thank you.
Dominic.
Thank
as
you.
far away from it as we can. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a journey, Jared, can I tell you? And I'm so grateful to Jenna because she's actually helped me get through. I'm getting through this slowly, as you'll see, as it takes time for me to jump in. But it's true. And I think that's kind of, and Jenna and I have both discussed this, just how the industry has changed. So how the expectations of what journalists are expected to do. It isn't just about the work anymore. There's so much else that goes into it. One thing I really would love to do, and we'd love to actually hear both about how both of you found your journey into journalism and how you got there, because I think it's really important. You both have such incredible backgrounds, and it kind of explains why this is such an important mission to both of you.
Sure. Okay, I guess. Do you want to go first, Zara?
Sure, I'll go first, but
Yeah.
we're both so I started, my love for journalism started in high school. Gosh, I sound like such a nerd, but this is the truth.
This is Nerd Central. Let it
No.
rip.
Yes.
I was very fortunate. So I had a school paper, but also I was working as a sports columnist for my local county-wide weekly. And I had an amazing editor with whom I'm still in touch with today, and we have a great relationship. But anyway, I loved it. I fell in love with newspapers, and I went on to work at the Village Voice and a number of different publications in New York. Later on NBC, and then WNYC, where I met Jenna, and then ABC News, where I met Jared, and just loved it. Loved being in the newsroom. There was nothing like it, and I miss being in newsrooms to this day. This election cycle is just killing me, because to be in a newsroom for this would just be amazing. But even newsrooms today are different from pre-pandemic. So from there, I went into tech. I was at Snap overseeing news, and kind of went into the platform side of things and had a few more experiences with some startups, and really got to see how the tech side thinks about news and information, and how different it was from my experience being in a newsroom, and how we thought about platforms. And so, Jared and I kind of reconnected over our just shared frustration at the lack of kind of care that was given to news and information in the digital space. And so that's really what really kind of started the germ of the idea of Forth, which has had several iterations, but we have just decided we wanted to create a platform that we would want to participate in, and B, consume, because we were getting so frustrated just wading through all the noise elsewhere. But it is something that, I do feel, again, cheesy, but that journalism is a calling for many of us. And I feel like, it's not just a jobby job. And so, I
you
think
don't
we
make
both
these kind of sacrifices for a jobby job.
No, you don't. And I feel, especially now, just with the proliferation of AI and all of these things, that there's really no more important time to try to figure out a way forward for journalism. And I just felt like, we've got to give it a go. We've got to try something. But yeah, I think Jared actually might have me beat in terms of when he started his journalism career. So I will throw it over to you, Jared.
The nerd gauntlet has been thrown. Yeah, I grew up around the corner from a radio station, a small community radio station called WVOX. And it was so close, and I realize a lot of the things I'm going to say now really, really date me, but it was actually so close to the house that our landline would pick up the radio signal. We actually had to get a special connection from the phone company so that we wouldn't hear talk shows in the background when trying to make phone calls. So I was just really interested in radio, and I started just calling them and seeing, could I go in and help out, and did some really basic stuff. WVOX is an interesting relic, I think, to what I think community radio once was. There's news, there's talk, there's music, there's everything together. So I would go in and I would help. At the time, we were still pulling CDs to play music, and carts, if you remember that from a radio world. They're kind of like 8-tracks, and do that, try and get together and produce the traffic report with the traffic anchor who's actually off site, and all those kinds of things together to get it on the air. And then I pitched a show that somehow got approved. It was a call and talk show for kids by kids. And I was doing that. This was middle school into high school. And then around the same time, so this is a suburb of New York. And at around the same time, Bill Clinton's presidency was coming to an end. Hillary Clinton was running for Senate. She came in to do a fundraiser with him. It was a Saturday night. Most of the people who worked at the radio station were college students and didn't want to give up a Saturday night. I saw this. I was champing at the bit. I wanted to just go so badly. I still needed to I finally was allowed to go. I still needed a ride. I didn't have a driver's license yet. But I went. I was told there would be no questions. I wasn't taking that for an answer. And snuck my way past some very angry Secret Service agents, started to yell, "Mr. President," a question from a 16-year-old, thinking no politician, especially a Clinton, would turn down a teenager at a fundraiser. The Secret Service saw me, started coming over to me. I moved, continued to yell it louder. Realized based on the look of the Secret Service at me at that moment that was the night I was going to find out what a federal lockup looked like. But he waved them off. I asked a question that came out almost coherently, and I didn't sleep then for about 48 hours and came home. And at the time it was interesting. I was kind of coming to terms with two sort of pathways that I wanted to go down, both tech and journalism. I'd been doing some computer programming just, again, to keep the nerd cred up, and had kind of started to get involved in it. And at the time, I kind of thought, but what's going to top this? What other job in the world? I am a 16-year-old in suburban New York who just spoke to the President of the United States. What other job is ever going to top this? And I couldn't think of one. And so I went down that road. And continued, working first at, then in high school, working at a small TV station, WRNN, and interning at first at Fox and then ending up at ABC for a very long time, where I met Xana, and doing the whole news thing. My dad is a Canadian. We used to watch Peter Jennings religiously growing up. And I always saw those people in the background and thought, I want to work on that show. And so I was a producer on World News Tonight after Peter, of course, but and that was just really fantastic. And then ultimately kind of took a turn, started developing software tools for production and reporting at ABC and Disney, and turning that into more of a career, and going on to Amazon. But that has really just been this has been sort of the nexus of a lot of different interests and passions of mine, and have tried to be able to figure out how do we take this incredible, exciting career, important service for the public and for democracy. How do we just take all of this, but also mix it with where the world is going, whether we want it to or not, with the technology, and actually try to merge the two into something that can provide some value.
I love both of those stories. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I love hearing I love hearing people's stories of how they came to journalism as a passion and a career. But Dom.
Yeah. No, and my thing is, you both have obviously the experience in traditional broadcast journal or traditional journalism, and also looking at the digital space. Were you at all surprised of what's been happening over the past, especially over the past couple of years, but maybe the past 15 or more years, of seeing how journalism is sort of, legacy media just losing, not being able to have the reporters, and how is that? Are you at all surprised that this has all happened in terms of the layoffs, especially over the past few months?
Surprised is sorry.
No, go ahead, Jared.
I was going to say, I want to hear what comes after surprise.
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know if surprised is the word that I would necessarily choose. Disappointed, definitely. But I think in hindsight, especially, this has been going on for a very long time. And I think in many cases too, it's kind of forced us to make some tough realizations about the industry, as a whole, and its economic, in a way, it almost seems odd that it was ever an economic viability. And I mean that because, you were talking about 15 years ago. I mean, I think I've already sufficiently dated myself. But I remember Craigslist and how that was the end of print media, right? That all of a sudden we didn't need to pay for classifieds. No newspaper will ever be able to support themselves. And then this idea of, well, let's just put all of the news online for free. And the realization too that, as ad tech started to get better and started to be able to track what's happening, with the reach of an advertisement, it kind of hurt ad sales altogether, right? Not just for news, but anyone who relied on advertisement. And in a way, it started to kind of wonder, how has news ever really been able to last? That we've somehow, it's strange. It's the only industry that I can think of immediately off the top of my head, with, I guess, maybe some entertainment uh, media as well, that is entirely subsidized or supported indirectly by the customer. I mean, like, can you imagine if you went to Starbucks every morning, but someone else paid for your coffee? Or, the idea that you as a consumer are the one who is consuming the news. You're choosing who you want to read from, when you want to read it. But while you might pay a newspaper subscription fee or something, that's absolutely not covering the costs. And so you're entirely subsisting on a third party to provide that. And at the same time, that's become so deep seated that the idea of actually paying a subscription fee that would cover the costs seems absolutely outrageous, and no one will ever do that. And so, of course, there are some niche publications that have started. I was thrilled to see 404 Media, which is a website that I read often. They announced that they are profitable. There are some bright sides in that, but it's definitely creating, I think, a very difficult moment right now of coming to terms with just reality in many cases, and trying to figure out, this is important. We all seem to agree, or most, I mean, I think everyone probably on this audience seems to agree on journalism's inherent value. But how on earth do we keep this going? And especially to this idea too, that I think journalists are so worried all the time, and rightfully so, about influence and where the money is coming from, that we make it even harder on ourselves. How do we take money and not be swayed? There's not enough people offering us money to begin with, and then we're going to really, try to start looking at them and going, but why are you giving me money? It honestly, if this was a job search, we would all be like, this would be the world's worst job search. Wait, why do you want to give me a job?
I can assure you
I
that it
don't
is.
understand that. Yeah. It just seems entirely like the incentives are all misaligned. The viability doesn't really work. And so I mean, I think personally, I think we have to figure out a way in which the people who consume it ultimately will pay for it. But how we get there is a very difficult path. And if I had a direct answer for that, I think I would have done it by now.
But also,
Yeah.
I think we did see this coming. That's what's so frustrating.
Yeah.
It was all there. And what's so frustrating is to see the mismanagement and the lack of courage on the part of so many, heads of media, frankly, to make the bold decision to start planning for the future. And I understand the financial pressures, and every quarter you have to show, significant growth, and traditional methods of funding journalism still kicked back enough money to be viable and sustainable and just kind of eke us through to the next quarter. But the lack of imagination to kind of find new ways forward, I think, has really disadvantaged the entire industry. And it's wonderful to see green shoots of, like 404, for example, and these other kind of niche publications that are trying something new and trying, maybe different types of business models, or developing stronger niche communities to help sustain them and support them. But it's not as if we woke up one day and said, "Oh my gosh, the advertising dollars are all, the nobody is consistently giving to public media anymore. What's going on?" We saw these things happening, years and years out. So I've, very frustrated, because it's not as if this was like a huge surprise.
And to that point, I think that's also kind of one of the things that drove us to want to make Forth was this feeling that, um, to quote a Simpsons episode, I apologize. I'm really trying to up the nerd cred quotient for the day, but we've tried nothing, and we're all out of ideas. This idea from the news industry of just constantly repackaging the same stuff over and over again. That it's the journalism itself, I don't think is necessarily the issue. It's in some ways it's the way that we're delivering it, and that I think a lot of executives haven't been able to really break the mold of, well, we need to do print on the internet or television on the internet or radio on the internet, and completely and fundamentally misunderstanding what the internet is and seeing where that's going. I think one of the more frustrating points I've noticed was in the last 5 or 10 years, um, every single television network news division saw the same data that millennials and Gen Z and basically under Gen X really is growing old. As they're getting older, they're subscribing to cable less, and they all saw that data, and they all came to the same conclusion that clearly what the market needs then is a 24-hour cable channel that's distributed over the internet. And it's technically feasible. We know that. We've seen it work. It does appear on my Roku and any of the other, systems that we have. But the question is, what ultimately is the market telling us? And maybe the problem wasn't the fact that it was an actual cable. Maybe it's how people want to consume things. And I think we need to open to new ideas. And so that's really what Forth came to, was this concept of how do we adapt to what the market is telling us people want. We know people are unhappy with social. They say that they don't trust it, but they also have been going to it. And so there's something in there that's good. And so we need to try to improve where people are already going rather than continuously try to create a new wrapper for the same thing that we've been doing for the last 50 or 100 years.
Very, very well put. Dom, do you have any more questions?
No, I think I mean,
Okay, well then I guess lastly, as you mentioned, people don't like social media, they don't trust social media, but they keep going to social media. So for this platform, for lack of a better description,
Mhm.
how do you Red Rover, at least a robust pool of journalists, the public? How do you get people to come on over?
Well, for one thing, I would say right now, go to Forth.News, Forth.News. Uh, Download our app, install it. If you're a journalist, there's a Forth for Journalists link on the sidebar. You can always email us. Our email address is there as well. hello@Forth.News. We want to bring journalists on of all shapes, sizes, colors. If you're local, if you're independent, if you're TV, digital, whatever it is, if you're doing actual journalism, fact-based reporting, we want to hear from you. We want to put you on. We think that that's really where this ends up being, is that, like social media, we think we want to be as many things to as many people as we possibly can, as long as the common thread in that is basic journalistic principles and fact-based reporting. So we're not really, whatever it is that you're reporting on, we want that. That's number one. Number two, if you are listening to this and you're looking for a place that you want to go, and if anything that we said today resounds with you, come to Forth.News and sign up. Anyone can sign up to read. Anyone can follow who and what they want. It's right there. It's free. Please give it a go and let us know what you think. Again, our email address is there. We really do want to know what we can do better and what you like about that, so we can do more of that. But all of that is right there. Sorry, Xana, anything else that you want to add?
No, I think you covered it. I would just say, we're also, we're building this and iterating as we go. And as Jared mentioned, feedback is so important. And, there's so many features and things that we want to build, and we have a whole vision for where this all goes. And, but we really want to hear from journalists. We want to make this a place that is a destination for journalists to do like their great reporting. And we want to be true partners to journalists in a way that other platforms have not been. So it's really key to us that we get that feedback.
All right. I think we're going to leave it there. But guys, I thank you so much, first of all, for joining us Forth on our Forth, but also for, the work that you're doing and it daring to dream of another option. I feel like whatever form journalism takes wherever we go next, I really feel like daring to dream of something different is going to be what leads it. I have no idea what that is, but I do feel like that's really, really critical right now.
Thank you. And I just want to throw my hats off to you guys. This podcast is something that is so needed right now in just this time of tremendous turmoil. And the fact that you guys took kind of your experience and decided to parlay it into something positive, that people could listen to and feel like there is hope out there. You're not alone. To really kind of put yourself out there in this way, I think is really, really profound. And so I just want to say, thank you to both of you for doing this, because it really is so desperately needed in these times. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Absolutely.
All right, Jenna. So now it's time for our recommendations for the week in the world of journalism. And I will start off with, so for this week, for me, I chose another podcast, Shock. You know how much I love my podcast.
I
It's
do.
ICYMI, which is a Slate podcast, and that stands for In Case You Missed It. They're a hugely popular show. Love them. I really, what connected to me was a show that posted on February 14th in the morning, aka Valentine's Day. For those of us who are single, the one day was like, blah. But anyway,
I was gonna say
uh,
you're not alone.
they are. It was basically it's the state of dating apps, and it was such an interesting episode to me because being somebody who has been single for a while now, over the past like 2.5, 3 years, well, no, oh, but yeah, and so it was interesting listening to this because I sort of disconnected. I was on the apps starting in the 2012s, and then I fell off like 2021 or so, um, or yeah, a little after. And for me, it just became too much. It's like you feel inundated with how some of these. I mean, in some of the apps, I don't know about you, but like it's like professional photos and bios, and you're texting everybody, and it's not texting is fine, but then it's stress texting because I'm like, who am I, how does this sound? And you ping somebody, did they get back to you? It started becoming so stressful. And also the type of people I was meeting just weren't the type of people that worked for that I was
Mm-hmm.
connecting to. um but what was interesting about this show was just hearing about a number of people who sort of gotten really, um, I guess, tired of the apps and feel like they're just a little bit too much. And I noticed there were some things um, some things that I got from it was, from this when I was listening to the episode was, what's wrong with dating app culture right now? Is it the app? Is it the algorithm? Is it the people? And it kind of feels like it's a little bit of it all. We all are sort of, it can be, it can demand a lot from you. And also, I think people are just tired.
I agree.
And also, in the conversation with the guest, they that they had on the show, they talked about, they asked this question if our dating apps making, um are the apps themselves are making dating harder. And one of the experts brought up, or the journalist actually in the story said that it's making it easier to meet but harder to connect. And I thought that was a
Mm.
really, it blew me, because I was just blew me away, because I was just thinking like, that's exactly it. You go on these apps and it makes you question, like, yes, you see somebody who's attractive, but or you're like, oh, this person seems really nice. But then you meet them in person sometimes and you just don't connect. And it sometimes, because they were also bringing up how a number of people feel like you have a number of different people that are possibilities. So before you met somebody, you're like, oh, I have one person I'm trying to impress or somebody I'm trying to go on a date with. Whereas now you're like, oh, that didn't work out. I've got 5 more people on my list. I'm doing okay. So it does change how much we invest in terms of people that we're meeting and who we're talking to. And last night I went to a local bar and they were having a a speed dating. And
Hmm.
me being sometimes the snarky person I am, was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to watching this go down. I have no investment in anything. This is going to be fun. And
Uh-huh.
I'm watching it. They were mostly, I would probably say, Gen Z or younger millennials.
Yeah.
And I'm watching this and I hear that it was I guess they chose something in common that they all had, and that was talking about climate justice and climate change. And I was like, okay, this is curious to see where this goes. And you know, I love the fact that these individuals, there was like probably 30, 40 people there. I loved watching them all have a great time and meet people who shared similar interests. And they went in seemingly with a positive attitude. I hope it came off the way to be. I'm like, I love it. And they were taking a chance by meeting people in person as opposed to just, being, texting or just, there's nothing like meeting somebody in person where you get to feel the vibe of that person there. And so I think between that situation last night and hearing this podcast is when I was like, this was awesome. And it was a great discussion. And I think it makes us all ask some questions of ourselves, especially those of us who are single, you know, and trying to figure out, how do I date? Now, mind you, sort of dealing with other things right now in terms of being unemployed. But when I'm ready to jump back in the pool at some point, this is, it just makes you start to ask questions for yourself and what works for you and how you see these apps, or how do you see, personally for me, I don't know about you, Jenna, do you like, are you an app person, or do you like meeting people in person, or do you like being introduced through friends?
Oh my God, introduced through friends. And this is not an indictment on my friends who I love very deeply, who are part of the, handful of people who listen to this. So
Mhm,
again, all due respect. But it's been my experience that when friends try to set you up with people,
mhm.
um, the person who not the individual, but the times when I've been set up by somebody, it makes me want to turn to the friend and be like, do you not like me? Like, what the hell was that? So, that's a little awkward. But yeah, no, I for myself, it's always struggled with the apps because, and this is just a me thing. Even when I was a kid, like most, teenage girls go through their telephone phase. Oh my God, I'm
Yeah.
on the phone. I never went through that. Like, if I was going to talk to somebody, I needed to be in your presence. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's like, a vibration thing or a vibe thing or whatever, but that's how I connect with. I've never been able to connect with people over some sort of like artificial or machinery thing, despite our connection. But we also know each other in the real world.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah, that's no, like that. It never worked for me. And it's just like I've dipped my toe in a couple times and I've come away with some pretty good horror stories, I think, as every woman has, but I'm good.
And actually, there is a difference between, I believe, queer community, like me being a gay man. I definitely think there's a difference in how my experience on it is, to you, a woman is, it's just woman who's like, and your experience is also very different. Because women, you deal with a lot.
Oh, of course.
You deal with
And
a lot.
listen, the misogynoir on those dating apps
Yes.
is also very, very real. So that's another reason why I was just like, yeah, this is not a good use of my time.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, what about which story do you have this week?
So keeping in mind that I think last week we were talking about my obsession with, oh my God, what's happening with the broadcasting industry, or not just broadcasting, but news. And so I did make it a point to pay more attention to other stories because for a while that's all I was consuming, and I don't think that was healthy. And I came across an article from The Cut, hanging on by a thread, why an independent designer today can dress celebrities, win awards, and still be one paycheck away from shuttering. This article is by, and I believe I'm pronouncing her name correctly, I hope, um, Danya Isawi. She's a fashion writer for The Cut. And what drew me to this piece, I think, was, first of all, it's a juxtaposition of what people think versus what reality is. And I will say that for my years working in journalism and in broadcasting, I've been a producer, I've been a, uh, reporter on radio, etc. But once I was on TV, there was a noticeable difference in the way people interacted with me, the way that, the seriousness level, the gravitas that I was given that I hadn't necessarily had access to before. And also the assumptions that people made about what that must mean my life is. I think I'm getting the impression that because, again, back in the 90s and the aughts, that people made such big deals about the huge contracts that, like, Today Show hosts were getting, or something like that, that everybody just extrapolated that for, like, well, if this person makes $58 million, then you got to slow down. That's not even close. That's not even close. And so I think that's what really drew my attention, because the article proceeds to break down for a series of different, very popular independent designers. Kim Shui is in here. Trying to think of who else, another name that I recognized. Sane Sintra, I think. I've seen the work before. I don't know the name of I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. And um, but there's several independent designers in here, and all of them talk about, the struggle of making their work and making their dream come true, borrowing money, living in multi-people apartments, which, I think people wrongly assume, because again, the profiles that we read of designers is of somebody in my lavish,
Mm-hmm.
fabulous apartment. That's not the reality for everybody. And so I really resonated with that. And I was really drawn to just like, yeah, I think maybe we need to pull back the curtain a little bit. There's been a
Mm-hmm.
lot of talk about uh, pay equity, maybe, but people being much more honest and transparent about what their paychecks actually look like. And I think pulling back that curtain is helpful for everybody, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of assumptions that get made. People don't know really what their worth is, A, and B, also what is a typical experience, what might seem, again, when you step on stage, when I step in front of a camera, I might seem a certain way, but that doesn't necessarily reflect my inner life.
It's interesting when you talk about, you know, perception and how people perceive you, and I think it's like I checked out the article too. And I thought it was so interesting because they even said a lot of designers don't even have their own studios because it's so
Yeah.
expensive, and they kind of work where they live. And even when you're talking about pay equity, like I do love when I see a number of creators. I notice them quite often on TikTok where they will post what they make during the month or what they made during the year. And I agree. I think it helps to, it's something that sometimes people gatekeep certain details and they don't want anyone to know, like, I'm doing really well here and I don't want anyone else to know how to get this or how
Mm-hmm.
much you're worth. And I love the fact there are people who are kind of just, like you said, removing the facade and letting people know this is who I am. And it isn't all glamorous. And you might think I'm making a shitload of money. I'm actually, it's okay. I mean, I'm doing well, but it's not what you think, and the amount of work that goes into it. So I think
Yes, and also
articles like,
some people, like, one of my favorite parts of the my favorite parts of the strike. But for when SAG-AFTRA went on strike, and there were a number of actors, some of whom were in very popular shows, who were showing what their residuals
Mhm.
were from their online work. And, some people would fire back and be like, "Oh, but you got a huge paycheck up
Mhm.
front." Well, then I saw some of these actors actually push back and be like, let me break down what it costs to work in Hollywood. We also saw that recently with Taraji P. Henson, where she broke down exactly what, yes, the headline might be, I made, I don't know, 2 million for a picture or something, although unfortunately, I don't think that's happened for Taraji. But let me break down what that actually looks like in terms of like after taxes, after managers, after agents, all of the other things that I have to pay for. Here's what actually goes into my bank account. It's not what you're thinking. But again, because we all know the big glossy headlines of, like Julia Roberts making 20 million a picture, I think people extrapolate that and they project that onto just about everybody working in some sort of creative field, and that's just so not the case.
Well, that's a great article. And again, I hope people appreciate this, that you could have great, journalism can also open up great discussions with people and things that you ordinarily wouldn't really think of sharing or don't even think about, or things that you're going through and you're like, oh, wait a minute. I'm going through that exact same thing. So I'm so grateful for these pieces and for the people who are working every day putting this together. So,
Well, as always, Dom, I am grateful for you.
yeah, I'm grateful for you, Jenna. And thank you to our guests, of course, too, right? Xana and Jared from Forth, Forth.News. Please go check them out. And yeah, thank you, Jenna, for all the work that you do with me. Thank you. You're the best.
Same here. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye. Laid Off and Looking is an independent podcast conceived of and created by Jenna Flanagan and Dominic Camia. Reach out to us anytime at layoffandlookingpod@gmail.com. New episodes drop every Friday at noon. Next week, we'll talk to Paul Farhi, former Washington Post media reporter who recently published an article in The Atlantic, Is American Journalism Headed Towards an Extinction? Level event. We'll see you then.